Hi, everybody. Welcome. And I wanted to make a little bit of a lecture on week 3 as we're going into it tomorrow. Um, Looks like we have some really good essays so far. I'm going to look at the course right now so you can look at it with me. This is look at so week 3, things here will be due on the 14th, so next Monday. This is one of my favorite periods of time. Um, it's truly the beginning of the shocking new way of doing things, which is what you just wrote about in Essay 2, Shock of the New. It really was a big deal. We don't think of these things as shocking anymore, of course, but during that time, in the mid to later 1800s, it was very much shocking. Um, So this is the week of these greats. Matisse, who is just a brilliant man, use of color and simplicity. He started to do these more simplistic paintings after he was almost losing his sight, much later in his life, in his from his 60s on. And he started. These are actually made out of cutouts. I have a really good um, video here of let's see, where is it? Modern Masters. And this as a series, you're going to see more of Picasso and Andy Warhol and Salvador Dali, and you're going to see those. It's one of the best I've found. It's a young man who writes about art. He's very funny, but he goes right to the sites, and some of it's very I guess, emotional. He goes into a chapel that Matisse designed for a nun who was a friend of his, and it was very moving. The other thing we're doing this week is German Expressionism. These are just kind of my favorites. This is why I wanted to design this course just on modern art. Um, this was a period of time we're looking at actually during this time. Let me see here. The next couple of weeks, week 3 and 4, are basically about World War I and World War II. So you can see here, this is not exactly the most, pretty looking painting, but the German Expressionists, and there were a few women who aren't talked about that much, but you will see some, um, who were showing what the war did to people and what it looked like. So, and they were all conscripted into the army too, by the way. So, which was sad because when you think about it, up until this point, all of Europe was traveling back and forth, no problems, and all of a sudden, the French artists who knew the German artists and other artists, Spanish, were all of a sudden enemies and had to fight in a war against each other, 2 wars. So this shows, you'll see some really almost what I'd call uneasy or queasy. He uses a lot of greens and yellows that are like this. You'll see some different ones. What I like about it is that it really is true expressionism. They're very boldly expressing exactly what Germany, especially Berlin, would look like in the war. And they were very critical of what they called the industrialists who were making the weapons and making a lot of money on those weapons during those years. So, and then meanwhile, young men were being brought back without their limbs, etc. So that was depressing. This is Picasso. This was his breakthrough painting. You're going to learn about this. The actual, I'm giving you a choice of writing this essay about either Matisse or Picasso. If you really want to write about a German expressionist, go ahead and let me know you're going to do that, but that's okay too. The other thing that's going on because of Matisse, Faubism, which means wild beast, and it got kind of a bad rap because it was so shocking in France during this time. I'm going to open this, see if I can open this up. There we go. So I want you to look at these two, but this way I can just kind of go through it and talk you through it. Faubism got the name from, and this is when the art critics were kind of abounding now to talk about what they felt about art. Most of them were not artists, and always keep that in mind when you read critics. Les Fauves, The Wild Beasts, and Camille Leclerc decided, he's a critic, and he said, describing what you're seeing with Impressionism and especially with the Fauves, which really got wild with color and even more, uh, I guess the brush strokes and everything were even wilder than the Impressionists. Um, so this is the late 19th and early 20th century. Matisse was pretty much the person who started it, and there were about 5 to 10 of them. So here we go. A pot of paint has been flung in the face of the public. So that's what the public is feeling. It's similar to what you just wrote about in Shock of the New. This is all new and it's all shocking to the public, which we still have today. We have some very, what people consider shocking work, but you'll study that later in the course. So the characteristics of this type of painting, expressionistic use of, you're going to see uncharacteristic and unexpected colors. This is what was important, the release of the artist's inner vision. So whatever they were thinking about the war, many of them were wounded, came back and continued painting. And that's where you get some of these. Evoke feelings. Now they care about evoking your feelings as you look at the pictures. And a distortion of images and violent brushstrokes. All of this describes wartime. So modern art, I think you've done a lot of reading. I've given you articles and things. Modern art has to do with describing and expressing in an artistic way what is going on around you. My master's thesis, and I gave you, I think, one of the intro chapters of it, where I was trying to describe when did it start, and there's every historian has different views of that. Some date it in the 1940s. I took it all the way back to Da Vinci because he was a very modern person. That's what they call a Renaissance man, could do all kinds of things and delved into philosophy and religion and everything you can imagine. That's what makes a modern person. They're expressing what's going on in their contemporary times, what's going on in their environment. So here's Matisse. This is a Matisse, and André Derain, who was a close friend of his. They were all what you considered Fauves. So he did a portrait, and you can see right here, let's go closer. You can see how, why they would consider these violent strokes, just dabbing them in, and the unexpected colors. He wasn't painting anything like a background. He didn't care about that. He was expressing expressions and mood. So in this, you can definitely see, without any kind of realistic smooth look, you can still see an expression and a feeling of this person. It's just that he was using very different colors and a lot of reds, greens, and yellows, as opposed to the primary colors that even Van Gogh used, which was red, yellow, and blue. Derain did a portrait of his friend, and I love this one specifically. And it's because he, I was trying to get this whole thing on, sorry. I like this one even better. He does a little bit softer look in the background, but look at how he handles shading. And this is what we call value, as you've learned in the beginning of the course with the terminology. Instead, this is unexpected colors. They were bored out of their minds with the prettiness of the Impressionists, even though they were, they knew a lot of them were friends, but this is a younger generation. So he taps in, instead of like a darker blue, he puts in purple, because that's an immediate way of making it look like shadow. Same thing here. And you can see the very heavy brush strokes there. Matisse, a rapid rendering of a landscape, rapid is the word here, represents only one moment of his existence. That's why they painted quickly. I prefer by insisting upon its essential character to losing charm in order to obtain greater stability. So he's saying to do it faster and insisting on it's, he's trying to get to the essence of the character. And that is really an important concept of modernity and modern art. Now, when he was younger, and this happens a lot, he would copy other people's work. This one you saw during the Impressionist period, which is just this last week, Seurat doing pointillism. This is how young artists learn to paint. And in fact, it's not copying. In fact, I was in art school for 4 years. We were encouraged to try to copy the masters in that way. And it's amazing what you learn by doing that. This is another one. And here's Matisse, very scholarly looking, professorial, the glasses and everything. He was quite a character. And he lived to be quite old. So this is when he was younger. This is a portrait of his wife. Some people call this give it the title of the Green Stripe. So same thing. And she loved this painting, by the way. So here's the same thing going on. The unexpected colors, but he absolutely grabs her expression and even her thought. This is one of his most famous ones. Many of his, by the way, are in Russia in the Hermitage Museum, which is a massive palace that after the Tsar was taken away, I mean, this is before him, but, or actually it was after. So they were gathering, there was an industrialist in Moscow who was super rich and he traveled, he loved art. So he was traveling in France and saw some of Matisse's paintings and he bought like 32 of them. And that was the point where Matisse started having a more stable financial life. So this is interesting. It's called Harmony in Red, and this is interesting because the walls just look like the tablecloth. So he's just bringing it all back up, and you can see how intense the reds are. This is another one where he started to find his own voice, what we call a voice. When you finally hit your stride in your own expressionistic work. I did the same thing. You find your own style. This is called The Joy of Life. It's one of his breakthrough paintings. You see the same thing. He's really fooling around with colors now. But The Joy of Life, he's trying to show what it brings joy to human beings. And one of them is love or sex, if you want to call it that. Music, dance are the things he really concentrates on. Here's a large, you can see how big this one is. This is a different version of that, and he did many of them. Beautiful, simplistic work. Doesn't have to have any detail. He's simply showing movement. And this is the one, and you'll see a really great clip in the Modern Masters that linked to that documentary. And Alistair Sooke, who's the person who's in the documentary, he goes to the house in southern France where Matisse spent the last years of his life. And like I said, he cut these out. And what Sooke does is there's an artist in a residence there in that home. So it's like kind of a museum, but they're using it for teaching. And Alistair, this woman who was an artist in residence said, "Okay, here's one of his most famous. We're going to try to recreate this," and it is hilarious, but it teaches a great lesson about how difficult this is. Many people look at things like this. In fact, all modern art going forward, my kid could do that. And you'll see what Alistair does as an adult trying to cut this and make it as powerful as this one is. And he just doesn't, it just looks horrible, and he calls it roadkill. One of the cool things about this is when artists started moving off the canvas, many people feel very nervous. I used to teach privately to people who wanted to learn to paint of all different backgrounds. They always wanted to keep things in the on the canvas, nothing going off the canvas, as if that there's some kind of rule against that. This also, and she describes this, you have to watch that film. She describes this really well as weight. You can, that he's sinking. This is Icarus, that mythological Greek story about flying too close to the sun. This shows that he is now on his way down. And then this wonderful little piece here of the heart. I love this painting. I actually saw this in person. I did not know it was in New York at the Museum of Modern Art. And I was walking through a room and I turned around a corner and there it was. And I'd been teaching this course for years before that. And it just knocked me. And this is also described in that same film documentary. This is one of the most unusual paintings he's done. It was during the war, and he had a son. His son did take piano lessons and hated them. And they go through this in detail about how gray it was. So this is how modern artists express what's going on around them. He was used to painting very beautiful flowers and people and different types of activities. And this was him saying, this is what's really going on and I need to say something about it. These are details of it. These are ones I actually took in the museum in New York. And you can see, and they describe this as almost like a cut or slice into the head, which describes the kind of damage that was being felt by young men. Looks like that was the end of that. So anyway, I wanted to show you that. And let me see if there's anything else. Read this article, The Function of Art in Modernism. And I want you to read this. It's a very good article. Let me see how many pages. It's only 6 pages. And it really goes into, it kind of fits with what I gave you in the first week. Art for Art's sake, wild 18th and 19th century. Somebody mistyped that. And the function. So read through that. It gives you, I just want you to get a really good, just a treasure trove of explanations of what this period was like. And then we do Picasso. There's German Expressionism. It's one more. Actually, I'm going to go through this. We have time. This period, like I said, this is probably some of the most intense, other than modern, contemporary work. So there were 2 different groups that formed, trying to express. They were from different parts of Germany. One, I think, started in Switzerland. Die Brücke, the bridge. So they're talking about the bridge between traditional and contemporary work. And they were trying to bring the public along with it. Like this, we can't, just paint pretty flowers anymore. Kirchner is one of the greatest. He's one of the best. And you'll see a couple of women in here too. So same thing as the Phobes. This is even worse though, or more true, the distortion and the color. Centered in Dresden. This is a really good example. He actually fought in the war. He was injured and he went back 3 different times. So this, this artist, he's an artist. He was not some, person who got out of the war or came back. It was so different there because they had to go and they fought and died. Many of them did. The ones who came back, but to go back and back and back by choice. He was in a hospital and chose to go back to the front. So that tells you what a brave person he was. This is what he's seeing. These horrible yellow colors, this horrible green. Now, he was not injured. He didn't have his hand cut off. This is a metaphor for the destruction of human bodies, and that was real. So he's basically showing himself in his uniform back in his studio. 1915. This is a big theme of his, is going after the wealthy people who are making money off the war. And a lot of his work shows damaged soldiers on crutches, lost limbs, and then they'll have like a very rich banker right in front of them walking on the street. This is 1914, the beginning of World War I, although 1913 was leading up to it, so things were changing. And you can see how he's portraying these women who are walking through the streets of Berlin, which is a very cosmopolitan, sophisticated city, without a care when others are suffering. So there's this movement he does too, that there's movements of, this sort of elliptical thing here and sharp features. They look very ugly and scary. Here's another one. Now this one he's got in pastels, which softens it a little bit, but still has that sort of two arcs here. And that's 1913. So, and it looks like this is one I took a picture of in New York also. This was there. So I was kind of thrilled to see all the ones that are in the textbook in there. Red Nudes. This is more like the Fauves. That was 1912. This is the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. It's their most impressive gate. It's been there for a long time, and it's iconic in the city. And so it's one of the entrances into the city. So the same thing. He's just doing, and you can see perspective is all out of whack, which is what the post-impressionists started doing, like Cezanne. And this is Marsden Hartley, who's an American. He actually was in a relationship. He was in love with a German officer, and that German officer was killed. And he, was pretty upset by it, and he took his uniform and he painted parts of that uniform to honor him. So these are some more. You can see how disjointed everything is, but they're showing what it looks like in the chaos of war. There's the Brandenburg Gate, how it looks today. This is Kath Kolowitz, who was, and it's got some information about her here. Themes of inhumanity and injustice. She really goes for it. She's going for the collateral damage, women and children mostly. And they're very grim. And look here, her son died during the first week of World War I. It's not why she was doing this, because all of these people were doing the same kind of work. Like here it is. Here's what's going on. And she calls it the survivors. Now notice this was after World War I. This was just a few years after, because people were still, there were a lot of bombed out cities and a lot of destruction that happened even worse during World War II. This is probably one of her most famous. And you can't get more intense than this. It's an etching. Sacrifice. I love this one. This is way into 1932 and 1934. Hitler was elected chancellor and pretty much started taking over the country. So this is right before that, and they had no idea what was coming. This was commissioned as a cemetery, and what I love about it is that Kathy is showing to me, the differences in the way men and women, fathers and mothers, show their grief. This is very German. There's kind of a cliche about Germans just never showing emotion. And he is literally gripping his body so that he doesn't fall apart. The mother, on the other hand, is bent over in grief. Der Blue Reiter was the second group of people who got together. And this is Gabriele Munter. She was one of the few women as early as 1908. And I love this. They're very grayed out. I've been a painter too. And how to, when you are trying to get to a certain mood and you're using a red, you add gray to it to cut down the intensity. But it's very simplistic, and it just does, pretty utilitarian. Kandinsky, one of the greats, composition, he was actually trying to put in a two-dimensional form, music. Same thing here, improvisation. This is, I think, Mark France. It doesn't say on there. Sorry, Franz Marc. I don't know why I missed that one. Again, right before World War II. Here's one, World War I, 1914. Mark does this. He calls it fighting forms, so it's kind of a no-brainer what this is. I mean, also the colors, death and blood, or passion, but in this case, it's war. Paul Klee, really interesting. His work got really popular in the 70s and 80s, where people think of it as more playful looking, and it's not. It's called The Presentation of a Miracle, and his work is deeply psychological. But on the surface, it looks like it's sort of playful and sweet. Otto Dix is one of the most intense German expressionists. It's called Metropolis. He made big statements about, kind of like Kirchner did, about what was going on in the cities at the time, the decadence, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's that. I think that's all I need to do. Picasso is sort of self-explanatory. I think this one is in Spanish. One of these is in Spanish. So you just look at the pictures and you'll see it shows him also, photographs of him, etc. Oops, I just saw that this has the wrong date on it. This happens once in a while. So I will go in and change that right away. So anyway, welcome to week 3, and I look forward to your amazing essay. And like I said, you can choose either one of these. So have fun with the readings, and hopefully I'll make another one next week, but I can't promise. I'm trying to build these up.